March 8th, 2014. If you follow aviation, or really just world events, you remember that date. It's when a modern Boeing 777, a huge aircraft carrying 239 people, just vanished.
Malaysia Airlines Flight 370.
Yeah.
And not just vanished, but vanished from civilian radar, from everything we thought made modern flight trackable.
Exactly. This wasn't like a crash near the coast. This was a digital wipe, an erasure. And despite, well, the biggest search in history.
The most technologically advanced, yeah.
Mhm.
Still, the main wreckage is missing. It's just baffling.
It really is. It remains this huge technological mystery. You have this massive, sophisticated machine, and it just disappears in our hyper-connected world.
And for you, the listener, I think it's that decade of sheer uncertainty that keeps drawing us back, isn't it? Trying to understand.
Absolutely. And that's why we're doing this deep dive. We want to cut through some of the noise, the speculation, and really focus on the core facts.
The hard evidence, the digital breadcrumbs, the few physical pieces we actually have.
Right. Our mission today is to look beyond the headlines, examine the latest analysis, the new techniques driving research, and understand why there's this big renewed search effort happening right now in 2025.
And we have to start with that fundamental point that changed everything early on. Remember, the first searches were all concentrated in the South China Sea.
Because that's where it was last seen on normal radar, right? That seemed logical at the time.
It did, but okay, let's unpack this. Because the forensic work proved that assumption was thousands of miles off.
Yeah, the plane wasn't there. It didn't crash there.
Not even close.
Oh.
The analysis proved, pretty definitively, that MH370 kept flying for another, 7 hours?
Silently.
7 hours.
Yeah.
Deep into the southern Indian Ocean.
Exactly. That initial misdirection, focusing on the South China Sea, that's a huge reason why this mystery has dragged on for so long. It cost valuable time.
Okay, so let's try and nail down that initial timeline, the ghost flight. Because the sequence of events, it really suggests something deliberate, coordinated. It certainly points that way. You have the last verbal contact at 01.19 local time, Malaysian time, First Officer Fareeq Hamid's routine sign-off.
All right, good night. Simple as that.
And crucially, voice analysis confirmed later. No stress, no panic in his voice, sounded completely normal.
And then just 2 minutes later, at 01.21.
Everything changes. The transponder, the box that shouts out the plane's identity and altitude, it just stops transmitting. Silence.
And the location where this happens is key, isn't it? It wasn't random.
Not at all. It happened precisely at the navigational waypoint IGRI.
Which is the exact point where air traffic control hands over from Malaysia to Vietnam.
Right. It's a known jurisdictional boundary. A point where you could argue operational oversight is at its briefest, its minimum.
Okay, so transponder off at IGRI, what happens immediately after?
A sharp, sustained turn to the west. And this wasn't just a minor course correction.
But importantly, this wasn't the autopilot making the turn.
No. Simulation analysis confirmed it. This turn required manual inputs. Someone was actively flying the plane, turning it off its scheduled path.
And the path it took after that turn seemed designed to avoid radar too, right? Flying along the border?
Yes, skirting the boundary between Malaysia and Thailand. It strongly suggests an attempt to minimize detection by military radar systems on either side. The whole sequence feels planned.
Purposeful human intervention. That seems hard to argue against based on those first few minutes.
It does. Which brings us to, well, maybe the most incredible part of this story, the digital detective work. The Inmarsat data.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting. How investigators managed to track a plane that had essentially gone dark.
It's just brilliant forensic analysis. Even with the main communication systems disabled the transponder, ACARS, the plane's satellite data unit, the SDU, kept automatically pinging an Inmarsat satellite.
These weren't data messages, just automated handshakes, like the system checking in.
Exactly. 7 of them over the next 6 or so hours. Triggered by the satellite periodically asking, "Are you still there?" Just basic status checks.
And inside these simple pings, using 80s technology, there were 2 crucial bits of data. First, the BTO.
Burst timing offset. Basically how long it took the signal to travel from the plane to the satellite and back.
So measuring that delay gave them the distance.
Precisely. The distance from the satellite. That generated those huge circles or arcs on the map showing possible locations for each ping.
Okay, so that gives you distance, but not direction along the arc. That's where the second piece, the BFO, comes in, burst frequency offset.
And this is the really clever bit. The BFO measures the Doppler effect.
Like an ambulance siren changing pitch as it passes you.
Exactly like that. The frequency of the radio signal changed slightly depending on whether the plane was moving towards or away from the satellite's position in orbit.
So the BFO could tell them the plane's general direction of travel relative to the satellite.
Yes, and the BFO data showed a consistent frequency shift that can only mean one thing. The aircraft was moving south.
It definitively ruled out that whole northern corridor flight path possibility.
Confidently ruled it out. It proved the plane flew south deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean. That discovery, based on BFO, was monumental. It refocused everything.
So pulling it all together, these 7 pings, using BTO and BFO, mathematically define what's known as the 7th arc.
Right. The line represented the possible locations at the time of the final partial handshake ping, which came at 0.19 UTC.
And that final ping is believed to be the moment the fuel ran out.
That's the widely accepted interpretation, the moment of fuel exhaustion. And that 7th arc became the target line for the underwater search.
That data was so powerful it launched, like you said, the biggest, most expensive underwater search ever. Thousands of miles from where they first
An
launched.
unprecedented effort, yeah. Based entirely on those faint automated signals.
Okay, let's shift from the digital world to the physical, the actual pieces of the plane that started washing up.
Starting in July 2015, yeah. Confirmed debris began appearing on coastlines in the western Indian Ocean Reunion Island, Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, Mauritius.
And importantly, ocean drift models, starting from that 7th arc, predicted debris would end up in these exact areas, didn't they?
They did. It was a huge validation of the Inmarsat analysis and the 7th arc location. The models showed how currents would carry floating debris from that region westward over time.
What were some of the key confirmed pieces?
Well, the most famous is probably the flaprome part of the wing's trailing edge found on Reunion Island. That was the first major confirmation.
And there was an interior piece, too.
Yes, a main cabin interior panel found in Mauritius. That's significant because it's the only confirmed part from inside the passenger cabin found so far.
But the piece that sparked the most debate, the one central to the whole end-of-flight argument, is the right outboard flap found in Tanzania.
Ah, yes, the flap. This piece is really at the crux of a major disagreement about the plane's final moments.
The official investigation body, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, the ATSB, they analyzed it. And what was their conclusion?
Based on their analysis of the damage and simulations, the ATSB concluded the flap was likely in a retracted position upon impact.
Retracted, meaning the plane wasn't configured for a landing or a ditching.
Correct. That supported their primary scenario, an uncontrolled high-speed dive into the ocean after fuel exhaustion, a catastrophic impact.
But there's another interpretation of that same piece of debris.
There is, a significant one, pushed by several independent investigators and engineers. They look at the same flap, the same damage.
One sees something different.
Completely different. They argue that certain damage patterns, like the clean shearing along the edge, are actually more consistent with the flap being extended or partially extended.
Extended as it would be for a controlled landing or ditching attempt.
Exactly. Their view is that the damage suggests a lower speed controlled impact with the water, not a high-speed uncontrolled plunge.
Okay, this isn't just a small technical detail, is it? This is fundamental. Retracted flap means high-speed dive, likely near the final ping location. Extended flap means controlled ditching, possibly much further south.
It's a massive difference. It changes everything about the final moments and, crucially, where the main wreckage might be.
A controlled ditching implies the plane could have glided for potentially hundreds of miles after the engines flamed out.
Potentially, yes. Significantly further south, along or even beyond the 7th arc, than an uncontrolled dive would suggest. It completely changes the potential search area.
So the physical evidence itself is contested, pointing in 2 wildly different directions about the endgame, which brings us back squarely to the who and why. Human action or catastrophic failure.
Precisely. Let's look at those 2 main competing scenarios. Scenario A, unlawful interference, often called the pilot's suicide theory, though it encompasses any deliberate third-party action.
And the evidence supporting deliberate actions is quite strong, looking back at the start.
It does. You have the systematic shutdown of communications transponder ACARs, the timing, the precise manual turn away from the flight path, the radar avoidance route.
It all feels very calculated, purposeful.
And then you have perhaps the most chilling piece of circumstantial evidence. The data recovered from Captain Zaharia Ahmad Shah's home flight simulator.
Right. The FBI helped recover deleted files.
And among them was a simulated flight path, plotted just weeks before the disappearance, that went deep into the southern Indian Ocean. A path that closely matched the presumed final track of MH370 based on the Inmarsat data.
That's
You know,
incredibly suggestive. It looks like a practice run, doesn't it?
it certainly points heavily towards premeditation. It's
Wait,
hard to explain away as coincidence.
but here's the massive contradiction. Despite this technical evidence pointing towards the captain,
The official investigation by Malaysian authorities found absolutely no evidence of motive, no red flags.
no financial trouble, no known psychological issues, no major personal stress reported.
Nothing concrete. They couldn't find a why. He was an experienced, well-respected senior pilot. That lack of a discernible motive is just as big a mystery as the flight path itself.
It's jarring. You have this specific technical evidence of planning the how, but a complete blank on the why.
It's a profound gap, which naturally leads people to consider Scenario B, the ghost flight. Catastrophic failure leading to crew incapacitation, probably hypoxia.
This was the ATSB's main working theory for a long time, right? Supported by their flap analysis.
Yes, the idea is that some event, a fire, decompression, incapacitated the crew, but the plane continued flying on autopilot.
And the stable flight path for hours, ending presumably when fuel ran out, fits that autopilot idea. And there are precedents, like the Helios Airways flight.
There are. But the major critique of this scenario has always been the initial sequence of events.
How do you explain the deliberate turn and the specific system shutdowns before incapacitation?
Exactly. The ghost flight theory requires a really complex, almost unbelievable chain of events. You need cascading technical failures that disable specific communication systems, incapacitate the crew after they've already made a precise manual turnoff course, but before they can make a distress call, all while leaving the autopilot engaged to fly south for hours.
It seems improbable. A lot of things have to go wrong in a very specific sequence.
It requires a lot more assumptions than the alternative. When you compare the two, looking purely at the observed facts, the time shutdowns, the manual turn, the radar evasion path.
The unlawful interference theory just seems simpler. It requires fewer unusual steps.
Analysts often call it the more parsimonious explanation. It needs one primary cause, human intent, to explain all those deliberate-seeming actions, rather than that highly complex cascade of failures needed for the hypoxia ghost flight.
Okay, so that brings us to today. The official searches ended years back. What's driving the investigation now? Where do we look next?
It's now largely driven by independent researchers, applying new analysis techniques and technologies to refine the search area. The focus is on squeezing more information out of the existing data and debris.
So refining the location on that seventh arc.
Essentially, yes. Advanced ocean drift modeling continues. There was a significant Bayesian statistical model in 2023 using all the confirmed debris finds to recalculate the most probable origin point.
And you mentioned bioforensics earlier. The barnacles.
Right, this is fascinating new work. Analyzing the oxygen isotopes within the layers of barnacle shells found attached to debris pieces.
How does that help pinpoint a location?
Because the ratio of oxygen isotopes incorporated into the shell changes depending on the water temperature where the barnacle was growing. So by analyzing the layers, scientists can reconstruct a temperature history of the water the debris floated through.
Wow. So you create a temperature timeline for the debris journey.
Exactly. And you can compare that signature against ocean temperature models to see which drift paths from the seventh arc are the most consistent with the barnacle's life story. It helps validate or rule out specific starting zones.
That's amazing, using nature's own data loggers. But then there's the really controversial new method that's influencing the current search, WSPR.
Ah, yes. Weak signal propagation reporter analysis. This is definitely where things get speculative, but also potentially game-changing if correct.
Explain the theory. How can weak radio signals find a plane?
Okay, so the WSPR network is used by amateur radio enthusiasts. It involves very low-power radio signals bouncing off the ionosphere to travel long distances. Independent researcher Richard Godfrey proposed that a large aircraft like a 7777 flying through these signal paths would cause tiny momentary disturbances.
Like a ripple.
Sort of. He went back through archived WSPR data from the night MH370 disappeared and claimed he found hundreds of these tiny anomalies along a path consistent with the flight south.
And based on these alleged disturbances, he proposed a very specific crash site.
Yes, a much more tightly defined location near the seventh arc, significantly further south than some other models suggested.
But this has faced serious pushback from the scientific community, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Major skepticism. Experts in radio propagation and ionospheric physics argue the ionosphere is just too noisy and variable.
They think these anomalies are just random noise, not a reliable plane track.
That's the main criticism, that you can't reliably distinguish a potential aircraft disturbance from natural fluctuations or other interference. Even the creator of the WSPR system has publicly doubted that it could be used this way.
So if the science is so contested, why is the current search effort seemingly putting weight on it?
Well, that brings us to Ocean Infinity, the private company conducting the new search. They returned in 2025 on a no-fine, no-fee basis.
Meaning they only get paid potentially up to $70 million if they actually find the wreckage.
Exactly. It's a huge commercial gamble for them. They started searching in February 2025 with their advanced underwater drones, the AUVs.
But the search was paused recently?
Yes, suspended in April due to weather and also some prior operational commitments they had. The plan is to resume later this year.
And the area they're searching, it's based on a mix of data.
Critically, yes. Their target search box, around 15,000 square kilometers, isn't just based on the WSPR data. It's described as a synthesis. It incorporates the latest, refined drift modeling and the coordinates suggested by the WSPR analysis.
So they're hedging their bets, combining the established science with this newer, more controversial lead.
It seems that way. They're focusing on an area supported by the most robust science, but also incorporating this highly specific, albeit contested lead. Maybe hoping it gives them an edge where previous searches failed. It's pragmatic, given the stakes.
Okay, so let's sum up. What do we know with a high degree of certainty after all this time?
We know the plane was deliberately diverted off course through manual flight inputs. We know key communication systems were systematically disabled. We know it flew south for about 7 hours, ending its flight somewhere along that seventh arc in the southern Indian Ocean, based on the Inmarsat data.
That much seems solid, but the huge unknowns remain.
Absolutely. The who and the why are complete blanks. And the critical how of the endgame controlled ditching versus uncontrolled dive remains fiercely debated based on that flap evidence.
And that how directly impacts the where, the exact location Ocean Infinity is now hunting for.
Precisely.
You know, if anything positive came from this awful tragedy, it was the wake-up call for aviation safety regarding tracking.
Definitely. MH370 exposed a terrifying vulnerability. It directly led to major global changes, like the implementation of GADIUS, the Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System.
Which mandates much more frequent automated position reporting for commercial aircraft, especially over remote areas.
Right, and strengthened calls for things like deployable flight recorders, black boxes designed to eject and float, although that's still not universally implemented. The industry learned a hard lesson about losing a plane in the modern age.
And this current search, it really highlights a fascinating tension, doesn't it? You have established science, the drift models, the isotope analysis, and then you have this contested, almost fringe theory with WSPR.
And a commercial company is effectively betting millions on the possibility that the contested theory might just hold the key, because the accepted science hasn't found the wreckage yet. It's scientific conservatism versus, perhaps, desperate pragmatism.
It really forces you to weigh the evidence. What stands out most to you, the listener? Is it the cold, hard Inmarsat data defining that final arc? Is it the deeply unsettling flight simulator discovery? Or maybe the conflicting story told by that single piece of wing flap? It's the combination of deliberate action and utter mystery that continues to haunt this case. Think about that until our next deep dive.